So now that we've actually built our first web page and we've looked at some of the different HTML editors out there, it's time to go ahead and get started understanding how the page gets laid out and how the coding starts. Now again, I told you I will be working in Dreamweaver for the rest of these demonstrations. This will be basically the same from program to program. There's only going to be some small differences between them. So writing the code is not going to be any different, depends no matter what program you use. Again, you could still be using Notepad or TextEdit to do all this same stuff. Now what you will see when you first open up any kind of HTML document is usually they kind of preload it with a lot of this to the basic HTML formatting here. What will be different between this and Notepad is going to be the color coding of some of these tags in here. Now, even though you may not know what all these mean just yet, they should look pretty familiar because we've started working with some of the tags. Now you can see everything opens up with the less than symbol, then there's some kind of tag in the middle, and then the greater than symbol. Every single HTML tag is going to look the same way. You also notice there's some of the ones with the forward slash before them, meaning that they get closed out. So we also have looked at the difference between, so we've also talked about the difference between HTML4 and HTML5. So let's first take a look at what the difference is between those documents. So you can see right here, this is an HTML4 document. I know that because I can look at the very first line of any HTML file and you should see something with the less than sign that says doc type and then tells what version of HTML you're using. Now this may differ slightly from file to file, but because there are different versions of the 4.0, which was transitional and strict, and we get into XHTML and things like that, so you may see some slight differences here, but this does tell me that this is an HTML4 file. Most of the coding in here, the rest of this stuff, is not going to change too much for the most part between this and HTML5. But let's go ahead and take a look at what an HTML5 document does look like. So I'm going to switch over my tabs here because I have two different files open, and immediately you should probably see that this doc type just got a lot smaller and now just says HTML. We talked about how HTML5 uses a lot less code to lay out the page. So again, if I switch back and forth between HTML4 and HTML5, you should see a lot of that coding go away. Again, it's going to speed up your web page just a little bit, and it's kind of an easier way to tell the difference between 4 and 5. If you see a nice clean header up here, you know it's HTML5. So I'm going to stay in HTML5 for the rest of this programming here because this class is about HTML5, and it's going to be a lot easier to kind of see what I'm talking about with all the tags. So let's talk about the anatomy of a basic HTML page. Now we've already created one that worked in a browser where we created our test page, but there's a little bit more to it that you want to have in your page to really make sure that it works properly. Now the first thing we talked about was the doc type. Now with most of your HTML editors, it's going to automatically put a lot of this code up here for you, but if you had to start from scratch, you can definitely type this in here, and I would suggest you starting just like that. Next comes the HTML tag. This tells the document where the HTML starts and stops. Now for the most part, this should be the outermost shell, the first and last tag that you see in any HTML file. Next, there's two major parts to any HTML file, and that is the head and the body. And the reason I point those two out is because there are extreme differences between the two. The head of the file tells all the information to the browser about what's going on in the page. This could be the title of your web page, this could be meta information, which we'll get to. You could be linking to external CSS files or JavaScripts or things like that. All that information is stored in the head and is really not seen by any user who comes to your website. So I always like to refer to it as the head of like a human being. You can't see the ideas going on in my brain right now. These are just the things that I have in my head that I know. And again, that's information that goes right to the browser that it needs to know. Nothing that really the users on your web page would need to know. Whereas the body, think of it as a body language, stuff that everybody sees. Anything that's on your body is what is in the front of the web page. So anything that goes in between these tags here, I'm going to immediately see on my browser. So we can do a quick test here. I'm going to go just to the right of the body, in between my two body tags. I'm going to hit a couple returns, so I have a little bit of room here. And I'll just say, yo, what is up? Alright, and in the head of the document, between these two title tags up here, I'm going to go ahead and say, this is my first file. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and save that, and I'm going to save it as index.html, and I'm going to save that to my desktop. I mentioned this once. We are going to name our files index.html for right now. Explain why here in a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and save it to my desktop. And I'm going to move this down here a little bit. And I'm going to bring up a browser window. And I'm going to drag my index.html file right to the browser. Alright, so you see, yo, what's up? That was in the body of my page. So that's what's being displayed in the browser here. But what we put in the head of the file, in the title up here, this is my first file, you'll see actually appears as the title in the tab of the browser. So again, this is information that the browser uses that it needs to know for certain things. We'll get into some of the other things once we get into the other classes like CSS and JavaScript, things like that. All those things will be linked to up in the header that you'll never see, but anything in the body is what's actually displayed in the body of the browser.